feels kind of weird. No game this week. There's not going to be another game for a couple weeks. December 28th is the bowl game, but transfer portal, man. I mean, it kind of was crazy, Nick, the first, day. I mean, it was pretty crazy. It's kind of slowed down. I feel like all the players that are going to go in the portal, like the big time players, kind of made their decision. I'm hoping, especially for UCF, but we're going to go into all the transfer portal craziness that UCF's enduring or people that they're bringing in right now. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Charge On. As always, I'm your host, Sean Green. What a crazy couple days. I mean, recorded Monday at, technically midnight. So it was Sunday at midnight and then going to Monday. Posted the video Tuesday, usually a day later than we post, but we wouldn't have got the episode up on time. And now today, we're recording this on Thursday because we wanted to wait until the last possible minute just in case anything big happened transfer portal wise. And now this episode's up on Friday. So a little bit different than our usual schedule. Our schedule is going to be off now because everything is kind of shifted now. But Nick, how are you doing? I know you're kind of watching the transfer portal kind of unfold in this new age of college football, and it's weird. I mean, it is so weird to see certain players that, we could look at UCF, but starters that you're thinking, are NFL draft picks or, some of the top players in the country leave their respective schools. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, you really don't get much time to digest the end of the season. I mean, we just played a big game on Saturday that was deciding our bowl fate. And 2 days later, it's an exodus at a lot of schools. Now, a lot of people I know are concerned about, who's leaving the program. But and we'll get into this more in depth as we go on here. But there was a mass exodus last year also when Gus got here. And we can kind of look at those guys who left and the guys who came in and kind of compare and look at the ones who are coming in. But yeah, because of college football, the way they schedule things, you know how I feel. I hate it. Yeah. It's absolute madness. Coaching tires going on, the portal's going on. I mean, we got guys who are on college football playoff teams who have to decide, do I enter the portal right now? And I even saw like a Michigan tight end jumped in. It's like, it's just unprecedented stuff right now, but it's just crazy. You better get used to it.
Guys, basketball is back, and BetOnline remains your number one source for all your sports betting needs this season. You'll always find the latest odds, team matchup info, player news, and game trends at BetOnline. And as your continued source for all sports wagering information, BetOnline features live betting, free contests, and giveaways all season long. Always the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports and events, whether that's NFL, college football, NBA, NHL, MMA, tennis, boxing, or even golf. Head to betonline.ag to join and receive your 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit. Make sure to use promo code BELIEVE to receive your rewards. That's BLEAV to receive your rewards. BetOnline, where the game starts. And let's get into it, Nick. I think when we were recording on Monday, that was transfer portal day, or it was the start of transfer portal day, December 5th. We recorded prior knowing, listen, there's going to be more transfers. We knew of Mikey Keenan and Devontae Brown, and we'll get into them and kind of who can replace them in a second. But I think, I'll be honest, I went to bed and we've seen, right? Shout out to Stephen Leonard, Elite Empire. They were tweeting some things like there's bigger bombs about to drop. There's some bigger players that are going to be leaving. And I kind of went to bed and I'm like, I think Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste might be in the transfer portal because it's like, I was trying to think who's bigger than Devontae Brown on the defense. And offensively, we kind of knew John Rice Plumlee was coming back. There was nobody, maybe Javon Baker. That would be a huge bomb. Like, okay, that's pretty big. But Jeremiah was probably the first one to hit on Monday morning about, hey, I'm entering the transfer portal. I think me and you could both speak to it, that's probably the biggest loss that this UCF defense and team could have taken. And we'll get into the other players, but man, and again, you'll hear us say it throughout this episode, the transfer portal taketh, and then it also giveth. You will get players from the portal just as much as you get taken away. But Nick, for this defense, especially the defense that just showed on, this last game against Tulane, That's a huge loss.
Yeah, it's a loss. I mean, it's your team leader, the guy who commands the middle of that defense and the defense as a whole. And we saw what the defense looked like for a few times that he wasn't out there. And Jason Johnson certainly made up for the loss when he wasn't there. But it's a similar situation to what happened last year when Tatum Bethune entered the portal. And that kind of maybe caught people off guard. This one, listen, I mean, with all the transfers, this is how I look at this. And I know UCF fans aren't going to like this. But this is how I look at it. You have to look at UCF no longer as because they're not a power in the Group 5 anymore. Those days have come and they have gone. They were glorious, but they have ended. They are now in the Big 12. And the Big 12 is coming off its strongest year in a long time, from top to bottom. UCF at this moment is probably a middle of the pack Big 12 team, if we're being completely honest with ourselves here, right? Mm-hmm. That's the way I'm looking at it. So if guys that have maybe exceeded or done more at like a quote unquote smaller school, and they feel they can do it at a higher level, they're going to go. They're going to go. Tatum Bethune did that last year and went to Florida State. And I know Florida State was down coming into the year. They just had a 9-win season. He was fantastic. Clearly, he held his own and more, probably improved his draft stock. You have to look at that as well from Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste's perspective. He's been here for 4 years. I mean, first of all, speaking to his career here at UCF, hard shoes to fill coming in for, Nate Evans, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Nate Evans. Him and Tatum Bethune were very young and had to fill those shoes left behind by some of the guys who were here when UCF was rocking. And I had a chance to be, in a class with Jeremiah when he was a freshman, and got to know him just a little bit, and I could tell that he definitely had a bright future ahead of him, and he turned out to be, like we said, the leader of this defense. So it's a loss, but he's got bigger aspirations, and they're not in Orlando. That's just the reality of it. Until UCF builds up some cachet in the Big 12 and in the Power 5, right now you're a middle-of-the-road team, and a lot of your best players are probably going to go seek opportunities at even bigger programs to maybe win other things and or improve their draft stock. So that's how I saw this with Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste.
And I agree with you. After these transfers, I mean, listen, it wasn't, I will say this, not as bad as a lot of the other teams. I mean, a lot of teams in the country have lost every single one of their top players because, like you said it. I mean, in the American, in the Group of 5, UCF is one of the top teams. And I agree that in some cases after these transfers, UCF is kind of right in the middle of the pack in terms of the Big 12. Now, can UCF go into the transfer portal and get right back up to the top of the Big 12? Absolutely. I think with the notoriety that UCF has among recruits, UCF can reload very quickly. Like if we look at last year's transfer class and recruiting class, right? You lost a lot of players, right? And I would assume we could both say that the top two is Dillon Gabriel, even though we kind of knew that he left earlier, and Tatum Bethune. I mean, those were the top two. And I would also make the argument that the transfers that you brought in exceeded a lot of the position players that you had that transferred out. I mean, not saying quarterback wise. I mean, even though John Rice does stuff that Dillon Gabriel can't and vice versa. I mean, wide receiver recruit. You brought in Kobe Hudson, Javon Baker. You do lose Jalen Robinson, but you didn't feel like there was a huge drop off in that group. If anything, you did do better by bringing in those transfers.
Yeah, that was one thing. And I had the list right here of the players they lost last year. And then the players like they released. So like you had a 1v1 trade basically of Dillon Gabriel to John Rice Plumlee. You lose Jalen Robinson and you lose Titus, and you replace them with Javon Baker and Kobe Hudson. I mean, there's a big difference there seeing what Titus and Jalen Robinson went on to do at their other stops, right? You lose like Cam Good, a guy who was a veteran. Eric Gilliard was a veteran. Jermaine McMillan is another guy who was a veteran. But you brought in a Jason Johnson, who we just talked about, a Walter Yates, who flashed at times, a Lee Hunter, a Swoboda. I mean, go on and down the list. You would probably take what you brought in over what you took out, or what left you. So that's That's how it goes. And I think UCF, I said it the other night, I think they're as well equipped as any school in the country for the most part to get good transfers in here and guys who want to play here.
Yeah, I think honestly, if we're looking at schools that are primed and fit and ready to bring in, or maybe more illustrious to transfers, I think UCF's a top 10 program in the country for that. Just for the reason, if you look at what Gus did last year in the transfer portal and the players that they're looking at this year, I mean, players want to come to UCF and there's opportunities with the transfer portal. Listen, UCF is going to a Power 5 conference. They have one of the top the top recruiting class in their history coming in. The program's on the up and up. So, yes, you lose guys like Jeremiah G. Baptiste, Devontae Brown, Ryan O'Keefe, who we'll get into, but you're going to gain players on that side. And there's players that are already there on the roster that can replace those players. And we'll also get into that. But the future is going to be bright. And yes, at the end of the day, guys, right now, after some of those players, for right now, you have to look at the team as it is as these transfers leave. So, for example, Jeremiah G. Baptiste, who's replacing him? I don't think he's on the roster. I think that is clearly a portal guy that you're going to go replace him with. Other guys like Ryan O'Keefe, I do think there's guys on the roster that can replace Ryan O'Keefe, and that can change your mindset. So, right now, we can't even think about where UCF is in the Big 12. We said right now they're in the middle of the pack. I'm assuming in a month we're changing that thought process. They could be right up there in the top 3. It's all based off of this next month and a half, 2 months when it comes to are the guys that are, saying they're going to sign with you, especially in the recruiting trail, right? Are they going to end up signing? And we'll talk about those guys like John Walkers of the world and everybody there. And then can you bring in quality transfers that can really either do exactly what you had with the players that you're losing or substantially improve on that side of the ball? So defensively, I think that's going to be crucial. Nick, you lose Jeremiah Jean Baptiste, Devontae Brown, Devod Wilson. He's not transferring. He's going to the NFL draft. Even though we've had some problems, especially with Devontae Brown, I mean, he hasn't performed at the level that we assumed he was going to, especially in man-to-man. I think with the way that we're running our defense, it looks like in the transfer portal, they're going heavy man corners that can defend man, because some of these corners that we have, it just looks like their strength is not man-to-man defense.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the positions that they're lucky that they have a load of young talent there in the secondary, that they're more well equipped. So, I mean, just off the top of my head, like the Henderson brothers are back there. You get more of a look at them going to their sophomore seasons. Nakai Martinez was the big one, right? And we got to see him in stretches this year where I think he looked okay. Brandon Adams, another one. Hodges is still here. I know how you feel about Corey Thornton. He's still here, though.
I wish I'm good with him in the transfer portal if he feels like it. If he wants to get shipped out, I'm fine with that.
I know you are, but I think they have it, and we're going to see some of these people. We got to catch. I mean, this portal. If you haven't looked at this portal, folks, I mean, it's like 1,000 names deep. I mean, you could get lost looking at this portal. So, I mean, we're going to see some of the names, and we've got the guy from Cincy, Jaquan Shepard, who looks like we feel confident that he's going to be a UCF Knight, hopefully soon here. And that's a guy who's been, a 4-year guy at Cincinnati. I believe this was his senior year, and he just started for the first time, played all 12 games. An impact guy, obviously familiar with guys on this team, having played them every single year. It'd be a great pickup to get a veteran like there, but I wouldn't put it past him to keep adding to it, because you can never have too many pieces in your secondary. You can never have too many pieces in your secondary. But I think because of the youthfulness they have at that position, I think that's something they can manage pretty well.
Yeah, and some of the names I really like Brandon Adams. I think a young kid. I mean, I think he could really take a leap if you gave him an opportunity. But if we just look at the corners, like I kind of went and listen, I probably missed some names. Like Nick said, there's over 1,000 players in the portal. UCF has probably offered way more than I have written down. These are just the ones that I've seen on Twitter that have made an announcement that UCF offered them. But if you look at cornerbacks, I mean, they offered Kyrie Jackson out of Alabama. He's a corner. Jaquan Shepard, you mentioned him. We're in the top 2 for him, and I would feel very strongly that he's probably going to come to UCF. So you have him. You have Mumu bin Wahed from West Virginia. I mean, he was a 3-star corner last year. He had a bunch of offers from a bunch of different schools. Kenny Solomon the second from Tulsa. So there's a clear emphasis, Nick. It's a very clear emphasis that I don't think that this defensive staff has a lot of confidence. Not saying, listen, I think Nakai's going to be great, but they're not playing him at corner. They're playing him in the middle of the field. They want him in that night position. They're not playing him at corner.
Yeah.
Jakari and Damari, Damari can play corner, but again, it's that they need to bring in veteran guys that they feel can step right in. And I don't think in their first season of the Big 12, Nick, and I think this is why they're going so hard in the transfer portal for corner, because Corey Thornton didn't really impress you. I think Brandon Adams, you see a lot of things that you like, but again, he made a couple mistakes throughout the year. I think going and getting veteran guys in the portal is so crucial, because you don't want to go in the Big 12 and look stupid on defense. If your line is great, which our line is our strength on defense, but if we're playing 10 yards off the ball and you're just getting quick out routes every single time, the corners can't do anything, it's going to make your defense look silly.
Guys who can tackle. That's what I want.
Yeah.
I want guys who can do the fundamentally thing well of tackling, because that is what, and I'm sure Gus Malzahn, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me that they're offering a lot of corners, because he saw it. He's on that sideline and he's looking at, man, my defense is just getting shredded right now, picked apart. Travis Williams, if he needs to make a scheme adjustment, if you're going to play if you're going to play 10 yards off the ball, then get guys who can do it. And if you're going to play man, get guys who can do it. End of story. And I just don't think they have the pieces. And let's be real here. A lot of these guys who were in there, they inherited them. This is the third year. And when you inherit something, you go with it, I guess. You get the guys out of there you don't think can do what they can do, and you have to just kind of make it work. So I think year 3 now, going to the Big 12, get your guys in here that you're confident in can work to your scheme, and hopefully it can fix it, because you can't get away in the Big 12. Seeing the offenses that we saw this year in the conference, you can't get away with the defense that UCF showed at the end of the year.
No, and I think it's not that hard, easier said than done. But I think the defense, we said it, the defense for pretty much the entire year played up to standard or exceeded expectations, especially early on in the year. I think you saw the decline, especially just right after Tulane. You saw the decline, and I will say though, the Navy game, they played really well in the second half. The first half was the struggle half, but they really played better in the second half. The USF game, I mean, you put them in bad spots. I mean, you really did put them in bad spots with the turnovers. And then that Tulane game, I mean, that was definitely, besides the ECU game, the Tulane game was the worst game of the year, giving up some of the stuff that they did. But no, I agree with you. I think the positive is on the defensive line. You're not really losing. Like Josh Seliscar is not transferring. That's a guy that when Baptiste announced he was transferring, I'm like, oh, Seliscar's probably next. I mean, you just assumed he's staying, so that's great for the line. Lee Hunter, I mean, he got more opportunities as the year went on. I think he's going to be huge next year. I think you might see him right up there at the start of the season, playing a lot more snaps. So I think the defensive line's good. And there's a reason they're going after corners. That was the weakness of this year's UCF team. And we'll see which linebackers they get in the portal. That's also going to be a huge get. Linebacker, Terrence Lewis entered the portal. He was really a non-factor for UCF. I mean, didn't play a game, so it's not like a loss. But that was a guy you brought in the transfer portal as a waiver. Say, hey, like he was a top 10 player in his class the year before. Let's see what he can do. He dipped into the portal again. So take that for what you will. But linebacker and corner, I mean, you found one in Jason Johnson. I would not be surprised if they went again and got a similar type. I know you got Armstrong the year before Johnson. So clearly they like that type of linebacker, a guy that, it doesn't matter if you're in a Power 5 school right now. Like you might see, it would not shock me if in a week we get a guy from the transfer portal that's a linebacker that you've never heard of. You don't know the school, because that's just some of the guys that we like at linebacker clearly over the last couple of years, and the guys that Travis Williams and co want to get. Let's jump to the offense really quick. Talked about some of the defense. Offensively, Mikey Keene. And I want to start there. We gave our little rant about some of the comments that were made on Twitter the last week that were ridiculous. I'm interested to see where he's going to go. I mean, we knew he was the first entrant in the transfer portal. We talked about it. But there's been a lot of discussion on Twitter, right, about do you get a quarterback in the transfer portal? Because I think one of the negative things about the last season was, listen, we have a quarterback that likes to run the ball and can get injured very easily, right? You had the backup of Mikey, knowing, listen, you have Mikey Keene if you need him. And then you have Thomas as a third option, true freshman. You go to him if you need to, but listen, he's a true freshman. You don't really want to do that to him. Now, you have John Rice Plumlee coming back. Thomas clearly is going to fight for the number one spot. You also have Timmy McClain. Those are probably your three-headed horse right now of they're going to be fighting for the starting job. Signed a kid, Dylan Risk. He's coming in this next class, who he looks basically like a Gus. He's a Gus quarterback. I mean, he looks impressive. But Nick, if you are Gus Malzahn and co., there's some good quarterbacks in that portal right now. I mean, quarterbacks that had high ratings maybe haven't lived up to expectations as people assumed, but guys that could fit Gus's system. If you're Gus, do you sign a quarterback in the transfer portal, or are you content going into the season with 4? Because I understand 5 quarterbacks on scholarship probably for many programs is just too much. Do you think UCF at this state of where the program is right now in the quarterback situation, would you go sign one of these quarterbacks in the transfer portal?
Well, which quarterback is going to want to come here? Because like you said, you're going to be 4 deep at quarterback, and there's no path. It's one of the reasons why the whole when Timmy McClain transferred to UCF last year, it didn't make any sense to me because I didn't see a path for him to play. I still don't see a path for him to play, to be honest with you. So no, I don't think a quarterback is something I would go into. I think John Rice is coming back. He's going to be the guy, like it or not. That's the guy. They're going to roll it with year number 2 with John Rice Plumlee. That's just how it's going to be. I think Tommy can compete all he wants. I think this is Gus's guy, clearly. Again, like it or not, I think that's what it is. So no, there are quarterbacks in this class, but maybe some intriguing guys, but I just don't see what the advantage is to any of these guys coming here to UCF, because you just cannot guarantee them any playing time.
No, and I think you can't. And I think that's kind of the toss-up. I think Timmy does have an opportunity here. I mean, he has a full season of start. Here, listen, yes, do I think at the end of the day...
Timmy. Would I like to see Timmy get a shot? Am I saying, do I know that Thomas Castellanos is a better option than Timmy McClain? I don't. I really don't, because Timmy McClain played on a really bad USF team, and I thought he was a bright spot of a bad bunch. So I like Timmy McClain. I just don't see where he fits in with the coaching staff and where he is on the totem pole, if he can really leap 2 guys in one offseason.
I mean, I agree. And I think he made a decision, and I think we can both agree with this. And I think he made a decision. He shouldn't have made the decision so quickly. As soon as he lost that starting job, he decommitted and he signed with UCF like the next day. So I think the problem is, like if I'm Timmy and I looked at like the grand scheme, I understand where he was coming from, because he's like, they just signed a guy, John Rice Plumlee. And at that point, again, this was early on. I mean, I don't even think we played a game yet. If I recall, hadn't played a game yet. He's probably thinking, listen, John Rice is a senior. Who knows how he's going to do next year? I've got a true freshman right here. They're going to sign a freshman in the class. And I got Mikey Keene, who Mikey Keene's going to probably transfer. So I see his mindset. The thing is, if you look at John Rice's stats and how John Rice did, you could have a 10-win season. And John Rice's stats, I get it for all of us that have watched JRP. Maybe the stats don't tell the whole story, and they don't. But, I mean, he threw 1,500 yards, 14 touchdowns, ran for 800 yards. So it's very hard I agree with you. It's really hard if I'm Gus to be like, And I do think they have an open competition. Like I don't think you go in saying John Rice is the quarterback. And if you do, I don't know what that tells guys that are signing with you. But I think you do have three capable quarterbacks in Timmy, JRP, and Thomas. I don't think you throw Thomas out there in year one of the Big 12. I think you do need to throw him out there just like you did this year. But I think you need to give him one more year because he is very raw. I wouldn't mind if they signed a quarterback. I really wouldn't. I agree with you. Who would you sign? I wouldn't mind if it came up on my feed that UCF signed a transfer quarterback. What's the harm in it? At the end of the day, somebody's going to transfer, right? It might be Timmy. Timmy might transfer again. Now, I don't know the rules anymore. I don't know how that works out. He might have to sit out a year. I have no idea. But if Timmy ends up losing, I don't know if he stays on the roster. And then same thing with another guy. I mean, it becomes kind of a pile of quarterbacks that you're just having to choose from. The problem I have with UCF right now is even in this kid that we just signed, Dylan Risk, I like him a lot. I think he could be a guy, and I think Thomas is definitely a guy. But right now, we don't have the guy that can step in there right now and just take over. And that if that's JRP, that's fine. But listen, what's going to happen when you go up against TCU next year? How is that going to fare? Right? What happens if you go up against a Texas, even in Oklahoma, even though I think they're garbage? Not Texas, they're okay, but Oklahoma's garbage. That's, I think, the question point. So we've spent too much time on it, but I think the only quarterback, and I know there's no chance of this happening, the only quarterback that if he's like, I'm interested in coming, and the only quarterback you sign is DJ from Clemson. That's it. And the only reason, even though he has struggled and he has looked a little off, he is the quarterback that Gus would work with.
I mean, I told y'all, like, off air, like, he would be a dream because he has that size to him. Yeah, he is a pipe dream, but he's going out west. I think everybody would agree he's going out west. Yeah. And, that's just that's different. Like when you tell me, like, should we go after a quarterback? Well, if DJU tells me he wants to come to UCF, then we can talk about it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. If it's any other quarterback, Devin Leary, of course, but those are the only two.
That's what I'm saying. Once I get past like the first like I would say there's probably like 4 or 5 guys that I would probably make an exception for. That's it, really. Yeah. I don't think that this is not last year's transfer portal quarterback class, in my opinion.
No, it's not. But yeah, that's pretty much the only one that I would be like, yeah, obviously you have to sign him. All the rest of them, unless they're coming to play a different position, RJ Harvey, he was a running back. You sign him. He played quarterback. He wanted to play running back. Then go ahead. But at this point, I think go into the season with what you got and have an open quarterback competition. Ryan O'Keefe. Well, you lost 2 top guys. We could potentially lose more. I'm kind of surprised it hasn't happened yet. I thought Mark Anthony Richards was gone. I thought Johnny Richardson probably would have shipped out of town by now. And no offense to those guys. I think Johnny Richardson hasn't gotten the opportunities that I'm sure he probably wants in the offense. I don't know if Gus, again, more guys could enter the portal. This is going up on Friday, recording on Thursday. We have no idea. Like some guys might enter late. Who knows? But I just assume those are 2 guys that probably would have entered the portal because you've got a guy, DeMarcus Bowman, coming in next year. We don't know what role he's going to play in the offense. You obviously know RJ Harvey's probably your number 1 back next year going into the season. But 2 wide receivers so far, Ryan O'Keefe, Jordan Johnson, we don't really count. I mean, he didn't play. I think he was in for maybe 5 plays of his UCF tenure. But, people assumed when we signed him that he was, again, you got a former 5-star from Notre Dame. He was going to do all these big things, and he didn't do anything. But Ryan O'Keefe, Nick, just kind of talk about, I don't blame him at all. I mean, again, it's one of those situations where if a guy feels like he needs to go show something else or, improve his draft stock, because he will get drafted at some point, I don't blame him. I mean, especially in the offense last year. But what do you think about Ryan O'Keefe leaving? And it looks like Javon Baker and Kobe Hudson are staying. So you're not losing anybody. You're not losing anybody else. You're only losing him.
Yeah, this is the guy. If you would ask me one person you think's going to enter the portal, I would have said Ryan O'Keefe right away. And not because of his role. I mean, I guess part of it has to do with his role in the offense. And we only got to see him in a 10-game sample size, really, under Josh Heupel, where he was actually contributing and very explosive, a deep threat, a burner, all those things. I just think he fits an offense like that a lot more than a Gus offense. I mean, the last 2 years, I got the number right here. He averaged 19.6 a target with Josh Heupel. And with Gus, it's 9.8. 9.8. So everything, he's obviously the screens, the end arounds, the little shallow route. I mean, that's kind of what it's been for Ryan O'Keefe the last 2 years. And not that he hasn't done a good job in that role.
Yeah.
I just think he probably sees himself a little bit differently. It could be used a little bit better. So, not surprising with Ryan O'Keefe. And I think there's going to be probably a good amount of Power 5 interest there.
I already think I know where he's going, if we're being completely honest.
For a guy that has, nearly 2,000 yards in his career. But what was the team you had?
TCU.
Hmm.
Go back home.
That's true. I mean,
he's from.
I think he's born nearby there. Yeah.
Yep. So I think he goes TCU, and that would be. I mean, we probably play them next year. I know the schedule probably releases in the next week or two, which we'll have an episode on that. The new Big 12 schedule next year, but that would be good to see him. In the purple. I like TCU, so I'd like him to go there. Guys that can replace him. Now, looking at the offers that we've already sent out to transfer portal players, it's a lot. I mean, they are definitely going after the most that they offer is offensive linemen, wide receivers, and corners. Those are the position players that clearly UCF feels they need to improve on. Again, I'm going to be honest. I don't really have a problem with the receivers we have on the roster. I mean, if we're being completely fair, we've got a bunch of great players on the roster. But they've offered that I've seen 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 receivers. Tyrese Chambers out of FIU is kind of the guy that if you were to get one, you get him. But that's a toss-up. He can go to Colorado. Anybody that has a Colorado offer.
Anytime that's got anybody that's got the Colorado in their offer, I'm scared. I'm just immediately scared, and I don't put much hope into it.
No. But two guys that I feel, and I want to get your take on it. Obviously, Amari Johnson, he was kind of out of training camp. People were raving about this guy. He gets injured, didn't play a snap this year. But, I mean, I like him. And then Quan Lee. I mean, he's the guy you signed in last year's class. One of the fastest guys in the nation when he will play. I mean, he's a burner. So I think you have guys on the roster that can replace a guy that clearly Ryan O'Keefe was that type of guy. Jet sweeps, end arounds. That's what you like to do. You have guys on the roster that can do that. Now just getting quality wide receiver depth, even though I think like Xavier Townsend's going to play a big role. I think Quan Lee can come in there and make a big impact. I think you've got a guy on your roster that can really make that impact. And it's huge. Like I said, Nick, it is huge that Javon Baker and Kobe Hudson are staying and they're not transferring.
Yeah, you mentioned Townsend. I have some intrigue there. We didn't see him a good bit in this season, but I think there's something you can work with. Obviously, Quan Lee has the speed. Does this offense cater to somebody like that? Debatable.
Yeah.
But I think getting Javon, like you said, and getting Kobe Hudson. And Kobe Hudson, to me, is, year 2 now. Hopefully he goes into a training camp where he's fully healthy. And be the number 2 guy. I think he's going to – I wouldn't be surprised if he jumped of Javon next year at some point as the go-to guy in this offense. I mean, when they really got him going, I thought I was really impressed by him. So at the end of the day, this is an offense that is so predicated on running the ball that, they're going to – I don't put it past them to add a receiver or 2 in the portal, but to me, it's going to be about what they can do with the ground game and working it that way, because the receiver position – not that it's not a priority or that it's obsolete. It's just, it's not what this offense is centered around, really.
Yeah.
So, and I think you have to kind of, if you're a recruit, you have to take that into mind as well. And I think a lot of them will, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think that goes into like offensive linemen. We're not going to get too much into it because the one guy I thought UCF had a really good chance at was Joshua Braun, and he just transferred to Arkansas. So that's an up in the air thing, but UCF is going to go need to get some linemen after losing a couple starting tackles and linemen there. All right, last thing before we are done. UCF staff, they're on their trail. They're hitting all of the recruits that have committed for this class. One guy that people were just assuming was gonna decommit from UCF, John Walker. I mean, he was just with Kenny Martin. Looks like, I mean, I could be wrong, but it looks like he's set. Like there's no changing of teams there. I think he's set on coming to UCF, which is huge. But I thought the Gus helicopter post was probably the best thing I saw on Twitter. That now I guess we can afford to have our head coach and defensive coordinator flying a helicopter to literally wherever in Florida to see whatever recruit they want, which is huge for the program. I mean, that's great. But that was pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, and John Walker, I think he even said, I think he spoke to, what was it, On Three today, I believe. Yeah, he spoke to On Three today, and he actually said that the Florida and UCF are, quote, pretty close in the race. So, and that's when he mentioned UF and UCF. So, and listen, he has every right to do that. I mean, you can go up all the way. Listen, we saw it last year. I'm not surprised by anything because I watched the number one overall recruit in the country who was committed to Florida State for 18 months on the last hour go to Jackson State. Okay, that nothing shocks me anymore. So, of course, I mean, it's good to see Kenny Martin out there. I'm sure Gus is going to be out there. I'm sure Travis Williams is going to be out there because, I mean, he would be their highest rated recruit ever, if I'm not mistaken, correct? Right?
Yep.
Yeah, you want to hold on to that guy. That establishes you in so many ways, I think, and other recruits will go, hey, this guy's a top 100 player and he's going to UCF. I mean, that helps a lot when you can get that. What would be the reason that he would decommit at this point? I mean, other than just keeping your recruitment open, your options, all that kind of stuff. I mean, Florida, I mean, if you get into a bidding war, and a lot of this is bidding war, let's be real here. If you get into a bidding war with UF, you're not winning.
No,
you're not winning. Yep. So I understand that. But if you beat out a UF for this, I just think that makes a big statement.
No, it does. And that's why I'm praying because that's your biggest recruit right there. And it looks like all of your other recruits. I mean, they just lost Jamal Merriweather to Georgia. So, I mean, when you talk about, the new NIL, that comes into play right there. That was an offensive lineman that probably would have started day one. But
oh yeah,
no, I think if you can keep John Walker, which listen, I think that's a task, but I think he's kept UCF DT in his Instagram bio this entire time. He hasn't really altered anything. He hasn't reopened anything. So
it's going to be tough because I know he's going to Florida this weekend.
Yeah,
he's going to Florida this weekend, and for everything that we're seeing, they are going to put a huge emphasis on trying to flip him. So,
he's their number one guy to flip right now. I know that. So,
yeah,
going to war with Florida again. What do you know? They've already taken one of our recruits this cycle, so hopefully John Walker will stay home and sign. I don't know if he'll sign in December or in the next couple weeks. I mean, I know early National Signing Day. I don't know if he's going to sign or if he's going to wait until actual February to sign, but hopefully he stays. And obviously Troy Ford, Braden Marshall, Caven Call, and Dylan Risk, they were all visited by UCF coaches. They're making the round. So it's good to see that. But a lot of stuff happening. And by next episode, we don't know if we're doing 2 next week. We'll see how much news there is. If it's kind of quiet, we're only going to do 1 to kind of revamp stuff. But I think there's been so many things that have happened this episode that we felt 2 episodes this week was needed. Nick, any final thoughts on this transfer portal and kind of, is there any guy you're hoping that UCF can snag in the next at least week or so?
Yeah, I'm curious to see about the Chambers, the receiver, because I mean, you're going to be. I think he got a final 8. It's not like a lot of guys just have like a final 4. They're decided between 2. I think it's a final 8, and I like what he did at FIU. I mean, 1,500 receiving yards over the last 2 years, so kind of fits the profile of what I think this offense would have a good deal on. But again, I see that Colorado logo. I get nervous. I get a little bit nervous. And obviously, like we just talked about, priority is to keep John Walker. Keep what you have first, and then see what you can add in. But don't worry, UCF fans. I know a lot of people are freaking out over O'Keefe and John Baptiste and all. And they're good players. They are very good players. There's a reason why they're leaving, and they have the opportunity to go to bigger schools because they are really good players. That's the reality. But I think they'll reload. They'll reload.
In 3 months, you're going to look at the roster and be like, oh, we're fine. So I don't, everybody just take a chill pill. I think they have in the last couple days. I think we're going to be okay. And yeah, hopefully the guys that we have committed for this class this year end up actually signing and we're actually getting them on campus. That is priority number 1. All right, guys, this has been Charge On presented by BetOnline. We will see you next week.